Wow. Okay, so for those of you who are wondering, it took StreamYard just a little longer than it normally does to let me know we went live, so you got to hear Marrow's wonderful chewing and face making for a little longer than you normally do. Tech gremlins, I spoke too soon. The tech gremlins, I was like, they're not attacking yet. We got everything working. We had a little bit of mic trouble, but this is why we set up a half an hour ahead of time. Nope, it was just like, nah, I'm just not even going to start the timer for like 30 seconds. So Marrow just gets to make all of the faces at the camera. So, welcome back, everybody. It is the first time in ages. Holy crap, Ikeda! $100 super chat from Ikeda. Welcome back. Thank you guys so much. Thank you.
Oh, thank you for being my
ladies, gentlemen, non-binary folks, and every gender in between and beyond. Welcome. It has been forever. Marrow, where the heck have you been? Because it has had nothing to do with us having any issues whatsoever. We've actually been besties still talking through all of this, including my car accident, which, like, yes. I disappeared off the face of the planet for a little while, but, like, that also I was in pain. You don't want to talk to me when I'm in pain. So, okay, let us know a little bit of where you've been, what you've been up to.
All right. Well, the first and most important question to be answered is, yes, it is Friday. So, it is Friday.
Time zone heresy does not exist.
Yeah, so I claim to be the person who I was lazy. That's but I've also had let's put it this way, if I had a choice between 2022 and 2021 to be repeated for all eternity, I'd choose 2020. I mean, like, seriously, I would choose 2020 to be the all repeated for eternity over 2022. 2022 can go burn in a fire.
Yeah, so, you had some pretty heavy stuff go on in your life.
Yes, I had a very, very close personal family member pass away, unfortunately. So I'm going to make this a bit of an announcement. This person had, all right, Ali, are you all right if I make a bit of an announcement? I've been trying to keep it a bit hush-hush, but considering they passed away almost a year ago, I feel a bit more comfortable about saying who it was. It was my mum.
That's your privacy entirely. Like, I've kept your quiet. I just said, close personal family member is all I've said, because that's all you said on Twitter.
Yeah. It was my mum. My mum passed away. She had cervical cancer. She was diagnosed on a Thursday afternoon. And then 6 weeks
later. Quick trigger warning for folks who have ever dealt with medical trauma, because we are going to talk a little bit about some stuff here. So, trigger warning generally for the stream, by the way. If I've got any mods in the chat, which I see Child of Nyx is there in the chat, repeat the trigger warning for mental health issues. Like, it's pretty obvious from the title card that we're going to be talking about mental illness and things, but we might end up getting into self-harm a little bit, or eating disorders, like things we both have personal experience with, ADHD, autism. But what Marrow's about to talk about right now was fairly traumatizing medical things that she went through with her mom. So if you've lost a family member recently, or if you aren't, just give her a few minutes, maybe mute for a little bit, and we'll pop up a banner or something when we're done talking about it, because Marrow does want to talk about this a little bit. I've been helping her through a lot of these things.
Yeah. So basically what happened was Thursday, she was diagnosed. She went to hospital. They diagnosed her with ovarian cancer, and 6 weeks later, on the Wednesday, she died. So my thing, which I found out, which I'm very angry about not being a thing that they say and they do, is there is a blood test for cervical cancer. It's not a gold standard at all, full stop. Do not think it is. It's also, annoyingly, a blood test for endometriosis. There's a protein that comes up in the blood for these two, for this to happen. So if you just go and ask your doctor to go and get this blood test. So it's not an expensive test to have. They're just searching for a protein that's in the blood. And elevated levels of this could suggest endometriosis or cervical cancer. And so I think have a chat to your doctor about it. Make sure you put it on if you are at risk. So if you have ovaries, obviously, if you've got ovaries, go and get yourself checked. Because
HPV is also a pretty big risk factor for cervical cancer. Another really big one, surprisingly, is actually polycystic ovarian syndrome. Even though you'd think that would be more of a risk for ovarian cancer, apparently it has effect on cervical cancer as well for some reason. My doctor told me that Marrow is a scientist. I am not. Any health advice you get from us is not considered to be health advice or treatment. Like, this is just us talking as people. These are things that we've learned over the time. Don't take us as experts on anything ever.
Yeah. So, did I say cervical or ovarian?
You said cervical.
I meant ovarian. Sorry. I'm sick. If I make 0 sense during this, it's why I'm hacking up along. But yeah, ovarian. She had ovarian cancer. So please go get yourself tested. The last thing I want is people to go through what I went through.
All right.
So that was basically it. And then after that, I didn't exist because I didn't want to. Well, not that I didn't want to. It was more like I wanted to just curl up into a ball and cry for like 6 months to a year. I still get a bit teary.
Yeah, exactly. Ocean Star says no one should be giving health advice over a live stream. They don't know your situation well enough to have comprehensive treatment discussions. Exactly.
Exactly. Don't ever take what we say as gospel. Actually, don't take anything anybody says as gospel, because gospel is crap.
All right, so with that, we do have an origin story for tonight's stream, actually. How this article came to your attention and what you've been up to. Because, for those of you who don't know, in addition to being my own YouTuber, I am also Marrow's script editor. That's actually how we met, was a no longer friend, but it was a mutual friend of ours, introduced the two of us because I do semi-professional editing on the side, and Marrow was having trouble with getting her scripts to be concise and like structured and other things. I wouldn't say good, but concise and structured and like grammatical stuff. Uh-oh, your camera popped off. Did you bump the cord?
Yeah, this is a really, really delicate cord. Can you still hear me though?
I can, but you might need to refresh for the sake of the live stream.
I mean, you don't have to look at my face. That's always a good thing.
But you don't even have an avatar, unfortunately.
Hello,
Lascara. I see a few new faces. I am not sure.
I'm gonna pop out and pop back in.
Alrighty. I see S Wolf. I see Child of Nyx and Ocean Star. All right, so just give us a moment while Marrow gets her camera situation fixed. The tech gremlins always strike every time we do a bridge. Oh God, Nimona, that's a mood. Gospel truth from Hercules. That is like, that's such a freaking like earworm. And she's back. All right, so Marrow, what was the origin of this? Because we actually worked together and collaborated on your last video. You roped me in to torture me for your own entertainment. So let's get people into the backstory on that, because this live stream is actually kind of a compliment to that video. So for those of you who have seen it, Bridge Gang, thanks for going over there. But for those of you who haven't, we should probably give a little bit of background, because it also has to do with something that's usually a rule break on our streams, which is we don't talk about community drama. But in this case, this isn't our community, really. Illuminati's not really our community. They're just YouTube TM drama, and I don't even know if you can call what she's done drama at this point, considering some of the stuff.
I'd call it self-destruction personal.
Yeah, I mean, like, some of the stuff that she's done just outright could qualify as abuse. Like,
oh no, it's not outright. It is. It doesn't qualify. It is.
I mean, allegedly. Let's not get sued.
Allegedly, it's pretty clear though.
There's enough testimony that, like, I believe the allegations are likely to be true, but that's my personal opinion.
Yes, Aikida. No, I don't think it's too soon.
This video is getting demonetized. Just so you guys know, by the way, we will be taking questions, but we are going to be focusing on the article when we get to it, and the topic of conversation generally. But I want to give you guys some background on how this stream came to be, because there is actually like a story behind this, and it has to do with something you covered 2 years ago, which was Illuminati's video on BIID and her absolutely horrendous coverage generally of anything to do with mental illness and mental health.
Yeah. So for those of you who don't know what BIID is, it stands for Body Integrity Identity Disorder. And it is not the same condition, but is very often equated to being trans because it has a lot of similar vibes, I suppose. Again, I'm sick. If I can't think of a word, I hope that you have turned on your Miro translator today.
It looked a lot like dog whistling. It really did.
Yeah. Anyway, but with BIID, it's basically they're not entirely 100% sure what causes it, and it's also there's also different types of BIID that might have different origins, but the biggest guess of where it comes from, it's basically a person
okay,
has
it's not let's not portray it as a guess. It's a hypothesis, and it has been tested. Like it's a very well supported hypothesis with what little data we have.
Yeah. And so the strongest hypothesis, so basically it is a person has an overwhelming, and I don't like to use the word desire because it sounds like it's something that you really want, but it's really a strong compulsion and want to remove a limb or become blind or become deaf or have paralysis or something like that. And they're pretty sure it's due to misfirings or in the parietal lobe, or they don't have strong connections like the
or it could be reduced. It could be reduced density in some of those areas, that are associated with the offending limb, because
or damage, or what else? Damage.
But it does seem to be neurological.
It's very yeah. And so what the parietal lobe is, it's the part of the brain that does sensory input. It interprets sensory input. So if I touch my face, my parietal lobe will light up. And so what they're thinking is that if there's damage done to the brain or to the offending limb, the connections between the brain and the limb don't work particularly well, and the brain just goes, "What the fuck is this?" And their limb feels like it's like an alien. It's alien.
It would be like if you woke up. It would be like if you woke up and your arm was a spider leg or something all of a sudden. Like, you could feel it, you could move it, it responded to it, but it doesn't feel like it belongs to you. Now, obviously, people aren't hallucinating that their limbs are like that, but it would be the same feeling in response to that limb. At least the way that it's described from the few sources we've been able to find where people directly talked about their experiences.
Ocean Star, that's what I've heard a couple of people explain it as the opposite of a phantom limb. I haven't had a chance to talk to a person with BIID about their condition because there's like 500 people, maybe maximum. Like, we don't know how many people worldwide has it, but there's not many people.
Somebody in your comments section said like 400, but like I've not seen an actual accurate estimate from anywhere.
Because we don't freaking know. From my research, there were like 6 different people who've come out and talked about it in the media. So, we're talking about bugger all people. Anyway, so Blair did a video on BIID 2 years ago. And
nominally on BIID. Like, it was more like an unhinged rant that mentioned BIID at the beginning and end in a very, like, bigoted way. But to be honest, the majority of it was the weirdest mix of like ableism and like trying to look progressive and like failing that I've ever seen. Like, again, I lost my mind for about a page and a half because you asked me to just like mark stuff for you and to give some commentary on it. And like, if you guys see bits in her video where she like cuts out and there's like a background with just her avatar or on it, most of those are like bits that she rewrote of my rage rant that I wrote for her, because she asked me to go back over the video and like find places where Blair was ableist, because I'm very sensitive to that kind of language. It's very easy for me to pick it up. And like we were talking over WhatsApp, which is where some of the quotes that you guys hear in the video from me come from, because we were having this discussion, and like I just lost my mind over the course of about like 30 minutes, because I was like,
Yeah.
she is being extraordinarily ableist and transphobic, and then like lampshading it with progressive sounding words just often enough to kind of lull you into a sense of security. But then you like stop and you think about the things she just said, and like, for example, she calls non-disabled people like whole-bodied, and it's like, wait, what?
Yeah.
Wait, what? That kind of thing. Like, it's not just like little mistakes. There's outright ranting where she was like, like accessibility is so expensive, and if you like, you should really think about whether we need more accessibility just because people want to do this for attention. And it's like, you realize that accessibility ramp like benefits way more than just the one like chick who might have BIID. Like, it benefits everybody. Like, you could break a leg and you might need it. Like, I've broken my ankle before and like needed to use accessibility ramps, because like I wasn't permanently disabled, but I certainly was at that moment. Like, I had a brace and I like was walking with crutches, and I certainly couldn't have made it upstairs.
Mm.
So like, again, that's part of where this comes from originally. Is we were looking over the video together, and we were going through her sourcing as well, and Marrow, who was in a very bad mood at the time, flagged the article that's in the description and in the announcement section of the bridge as infuriating, and asked me to look over it, and asked if we could do a bridge article or a bridge stream on it, because she had already written an hour's worth of script at that point between that and my rage rant. So we just didn't have the time to go over that on top of everything.
No, my by that time my brain was kind of melting out of my head. So yeah, I was not in a good mood. I was probably a little bit more harsh on that article.
Singham says whole bodied. It sounds like her understanding of disability is full of holes.
Yeah, so I was probably a bit more harsh on the article that on my video than I should have been, but I was just, by that time I was just, ready to destroy my house. I was so angry. And if you watch her original BID video, which
anti-alias polygons, if you watch the original BIID video, you will see why I call it dog whistling. Like, there's straight up flat out ableism that she does over and over, and she just contradicts herself constantly. Like, she'll talk about disability. She does this entire rant where she talks about like mental health representation as automatically glorifying mental illness, but then like talks about disability representation shortly afterwards, and then talks about like how it's necessary and needed, but also might encourage people into an epidemic. And she uses that word, which is wrong. It would be pandemic. But like, or no, she uses pandemic and it would be epidemic, but like and I instinctively use the right one. But like, she talked about how there would be an epidemic of BIID if there was disability representation. So she like contradicts herself constantly in that video.
Yeah.
Like, I had to watch it through twice to help Marrow with this. So like, I remember this stuff pretty clearly.
And it's one of those videos that on the surface, it's bad. And then you sit and think about it and you watch it again and it's even worse. And it's like, the reason why I called it the Hydra of bad takes is because every single time you take something down, you sit and think about it. And then another two things you could just, on that one sentence she says.
Well, it's because she gish gallops so much. Like, she gish gallops across so many different topics. Like, again, it's not actually about BIID. It's about insert word vomit of her beliefs on disability here.
Yeah. It got her videos for about half an hour, and 10 minutes of that is about BIID. Like I'm not joking. And the first 8 minutes of it.
No, Ocean Star, she does do that. She talked about her having anxiety in that video too. So she's like, I have anxiety. I think that people should get mental health help, but blah, blah, blah. And then she also completely misrepresents like stuff like self-harm, which we'll talk a little bit about that later, because I have some direct experience with that and I've been open about that in the past. So yeah. But anyway, we do need to move a little bit forward toward the article and reviewing and starting to talk about it a little bit. But you said you wanted to share, are there comments that are relating specifically to this topic that you feel that we should look at first?
Yeah, I don't think we'll just read them out and have it. I can't read that.
Okay, so I'll read it. It says, as a trans person, the first time I ever heard of BIID was an argument against my gender identity. This automatically positioned me in an antagonistic opposition to BIID. But after the initial shock that people would compare trans people and transabled people, I went and I did some research myself. The first video found on YouTube about BIID was Blairs' video, and it struck me as weird. Why have resources from traditional amputees and not from people with BIID? If the topic is on BIID, have people with BIID. So I went and researched further and found more information from scientists and people with BIID, which told a completely different story than what Blair portrayed. So I unsubscribed from Blair's channel. I just feel frustrated that someone with such a large platform would do such a shoddy job of researching and spread malicious falsehoods about a minority. That's dangerous. That could get someone seriously hurt.
And that's true. So her BIID video never mentioned the word neurological, not once. All she said was
no,
mental
she did
illness.
it twice. She mentioned neurological twice, once at the beginning and once at the end.
No, she never said neurological.
Oh, okay. I thought she said that I thought she said it might be neurological in her quote at the very, very end, but we talked about in the video a little bit how significantly less people are going to see that at the end after she spent all that time just like breaking down the idea that they were all just doing it for attention.
No, she never once said the word neurological. Never once. The two sources that she'd used that were reasonably good about BIID both said neurological, but she did not quote those parts. She never said that it could be a neurological condition in her video.
Child of Nick's $20 super chat. Thank you so much for supporting the show. Obligatory rage-filled comment against ableism. Yeah, again, we're talking a lot about ableism, but we do also need to talk a little bit about some of the trends on social media, because this is one of those topics where I'm not going to say 100% absolutely not, because I have actually seen profiteering off of mental illness go on in places like TikTok. And the problem, I think, ultimately comes down to capitalism more so than just the existence of social media, TM. But again, I want to get into the article itself and how it frames it and talk a little bit about some of my issues with it, but also some of the things that it gets right. But we do need to get through the comments first because Mero did want to share these. So the second comment says, I love how Blair acts like money and manpower won't be spent on accessibility without BIID sufferers. Like, seriously, the money and manpower costs are going to be there anyway. This was a point that I made in my rage rant. BIID sufferers aren't adding an extra burden on society. We're putting the accessibility features to public spaces regardless. Also, the way that she uses the words insane and mental illness disgusts me. To hear her call me insane for a history of self-harm hurts. Rhetoric like this hurts so many people with mental health problems. Great video, Nervardia. Your initial response to her BIID video is what made me stop trusting Blair as a reliable source of information. Thank you for working so hard to put correct information out there in response to videos like Blair's. Yeah, the thing about like mental, like her calling people insane for like self-harm. Yeah. So I'm going to give a big trigger warning. There's a trigger warning on screen, but I'm going to give another one because I'm going to talk a little bit about self-harm. Self-harm is rational. That doesn't mean it's good. It doesn't mean it's healthy. It doesn't mean it's positive, but it is rational. And what I mean by rational is that it releases dopamine and serotonin and other feel-good chemicals in your brain, because getting hurt lightly or scratched or something does that after a while to help numb the pain so that your nerves just aren't screaming at you the entire time. Like, if you've noticed, after you get a cut and it plugs up a little bit, it'll stop hurting, right? Like after a certain amount of time. And the reason for that is not because your nerves have stopped flipping out. It's because like your brain produces stuff to counteract that. And so self-harm, it's a maladaptive coping technique is what it is. People do that quite often. Some do it for attention. The majority of people do it because they're completely overwhelmed and they don't know what else to do. So it's not insanity that causes people to do that. It's a very rational thing. It's an attempt at control. It's an attempt at feeling better. Like, it is what somebody is doing out of desperation. But that doesn't mean it's not rationally motivated. It should be treated. If you are self-harming right now and you have access to help, please get it. Please try to learn other coping techniques. There is help out there. There's an end to it. I haven't done it in basically since I was a teenager. But the thing is like, for the majority of people, like, obviously there are outliers. Obviously self-harm can also be a symptom of things like schizophrenia, which can be delusions. But the majority of people who do it, it's not just because of depression. People can do it because of anxiety. There are people who pick at their skin, for example, because of anxiety.
Yep.
And like, that's a form of self-harm. There are people who will like hold an ice cube until it melts in their hands things like that. And like those are all technically forms of self-harm, but they're a response to an outside stimulus. They're a maladaptive coping technique. That doesn't mean it's healthy. You should absolutely get help if you're doing it, but it is not, you're not insane, whatever that's even supposed to mean. Like, it's a completely rational thing to do. It's just not a healthy thing to do.
Yeah, and one of the things that I really wish I had made on point in my first BIID video, but I wanted to give her the benefit of the doubt, and I was very, 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 very good at overlooking a lot of the issues with her video, where she was like, she put the video, this person was like, oh, if this person was self-harming, like she was quoting this article, and if these people were self-harming, and then she goes, oops, trigger warning, and then as a joke. And I was just like, because I kind of like skipped through a lot of the shit that she missed, like, because I basically, if you wanted to break her video down that literally is all about BIID, you have a minute and a half. That's all she does.
Exactly.
It's literally in a 30-minute video, a minute and a half is actually her talking about BIID. So I sort of like skipped the vast majority of a video. So when I rewatched her video, I saw again the blah, 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 self-harm, oops, trigger warning. And I just sat there for about 2 minutes going, oh my God.
Yeah, that was also when you reached out to me, like, hey, can you look at this? Can you talk about this? Which, again, I want to reiterate, I am not endorsing self-harm. Saying something is rational is not an endorsement of it. Rational simply means that there is a logic to it. That does not mean that that logic is healthy or helpful or positive. It just means that there is logic to it. It means that it is not like, it means that it's not coming out of nowhere. It's not spontaneous. It's not random. It's not nonsensical. It makes sense. It just doesn't, it's just not good for you.
Yeah. Anti-alias polygons. If you go on to my latest video, which I'm fairly sure will be linked eventually, in the Google Docs, there is in the description below, underneath in the Google Docs, we'll have her original BIID video. I guarantee you it doesn't have any viruses in it. It comes straight from my computer. I can't release it onto YouTube because she might pick it up as a she might pick it up and
because the video is privated. It's not deleted. It's privated, which means she could still copyright strike you, which she's known to do.
Yep. So so yeah, if you go, because I don't know if you are trans yourself, but your little icon does have the trans colors in it. So I think when you watch through it, you'll actually find a shitload of transphobia on it as well. So again, sorry, there's a trigger warning with that one, but you will actually because if you watch my video, you'll see that I come with some pretty solid receipts as well, just all the dog whistling.
So anyway, we need to. So this last comment, what section of this last comment? Because it's really long.
I think we should probably read the whole thing because it comes from a person who does have BIID, and it sort of kind of shows you the community, the BIID community, like at least the voice from that community, and it's really heartbreaking, in my opinion. If that is okay.
So it says, I don't think I can properly express how grateful I am for you to making these videos. More often than not, when someone without BIID makes a video on the topic, they do what Blair did and purposely demonize and sensationalize people with the disorder. It's so refreshing to see someone not only properly research and represent this disorder, but defending us with it. Like you've said in the video, there are so few of us with this disorder. Most attempts to speak up about our experiences get drowned out by people like Blair. I really, really appreciate the work you put into these videos. Also, good Lord, Blair clearly doesn't know a goddamn thing about being disabled. I'm visibly disabled due to a condition unrelated to my BIID, and it's so infuriating seeing people like her acting like they're an authority on what it's like to live as a disabled person despite being able-bodied. So much of what she says about representation and how society treats disabled people is just flat out wrong. She talks about people pretending to be disabled or hamming up their disabilities to get special attention, but the only attention myself and many other people get due to our disabilities is bigotry and harassment for daring to exist in public view. The idea that there are large numbers of people trying to fake a disability for attention causes so much real-world harm to disabled people. More often than not, people who try to call out fakers just end up harassing actual disabled people. I have yet to meet another disabled person who wasn't accused of faking their disability at one point or another. Fake claiming is also a huge problem, and fake claiming is a huge problem, and able-bodied people love to use it as an excuse to be wildly ableist to real disabled people. The way she talks about disability representation also almost makes it sound like she's trying to say she doesn't want to see disabled people in media unless they fit her narrow ableist archetypes. Blair's video just screams, I don't know shit about any of this. I just want to harass disabled people and use other disabled people as a cover. She has perpetuated so many harmful ideas and stereotypes, and I'm glad her reputation is in ruins. Sorry for ranting in your comments, but as a disabled person with BIID, I have so many thoughts about Blair's videos. Which brings us to this, which is one of the articles, it's from 2019, that she cited in her description as one of the inspirations for this video.
As you can see, it's got nothing to do with BID. Just pointing this one out.
Yeah, it's
a common theme in that video.
Yeah, this is one of the she went off into this gigantic rant in the middle of it, and this is one of the articles that she quoted, which it does have some good points in it, but it's also framed really disingenuously. So let's get digging into it. Hopefully it should be large enough for you to be able to read, Marrow. I can zoom in a little more if you're having a hard time seeing it. Also, for some reason, my ad blocker also seems to disable the ability for StreamYard to pick things up. So there you go. You should definitely be able to read it now. And so should y'all, even if you don't have the video blown up. So I will let you start off reading since I just did all of your comments. And we can read the first few paragraphs and start to give some commentary on it.
Social media personas built on the illusion of happy, perfect lives are so tired. In 2019, it's all about being sad online. Do you want me to read it like that?
Totally up to you. Audience, let us know if you enjoy this. Also, remember, we will be responding to comments and questions, but if you do a super chat, I'll respond immediately.
Trendy emotional distress on social media is part of many must-follow accounts across all platforms. Whether by retweeting the depressing reality of the So Sad Today Twitter account at 855,000 followers as of this writing, or commenting the obligatory same on my therapist says Instagram post, currently at 3.6 million. As recently immortalized by a Tim Robinson sketch in I Think You Should Leave, even if you do post pictures where you look cute and happy, it must be accompanied by a self-depreciating caption. Do you want me to keep going?
Well, also, we have a question about splitting the super chats, which originally you had told me you didn't want to do that, but if that's changed, then we can do that again if you want to.
I haven't thought about it, so let's go yes, it does. Generally, it goes straight back to Ali because I pay for her for my editing. So.
Yeah, I mean, my rates aren't that high.
No, I fuck you, I'm paying you.
Oh my God. That's literally in my editing contract, by the way. Like, it's a standard contract, and then in the middle of it, it just says, fuck you, I'm paying you. And she will put it in her scripts to test my editing skills, to make sure I catch it. And sometimes I'll just leave it there to make her think I didn't see it.
So yes, it's not me being angry at her. It's just that's just the joke that we have. But yeah, so that's the editing contract is fuck you, I'm paying you. Because initially she was like, no, it's fine. I was like, no.
You're a friend. It's not like it's that many hours of work. Okay, well, the last one I let you pay me.
Yeah. Okay. So one thing I have to say. So
first off, the framing of this is terrible. Like, just even the first couple paragraphs, like, it's so tired. No, people are still doing the happy, perfect life illusion. People are still, like, this is right before the pandemic, too. But, like, people are still doing the, like, oh, like, I've got this perfect minimalism. And, like, oh, look how absolutely stunning and perfect my playroom is, even though I've got 4 kids. And, there's all of these toys that are just, they're all put neatly away because everything got cleaned before the camera got turned on. So I mean, like, that stuff still happens, and it's still used to promote a lot of things, that it's still really risky to be very open about yourself as a public figure in any way. Like if there's any tiny dark dingy corner to any part of your like history, then somebody online is going to get obsessed with you and dig it up.
Yeah. One thing I will also say about self-depreciation. One thing I will say about self-depreciating humor is I find that a lot of people who have self-depreciating humor have a lot of self-confidence. I often self-depreciate. And I don't believe a single time I tell everyone that I'm full of shit. Well, actually, no, I do. But like when it's like, oh, I'm just a shit person kind of thing, it's sort of like, I know that I'm actually a good person, um, or whatever. I'm not saying I'm a shit person because I genuinely believe it. So, when it comes to self-depreciating, it depends on the person. And a lot of people noticed a lot of people who do self-depreciating humor have a pretty solid in who and what they are.
Though it's
So,
though it's also quite often used as a tactic to kind of preempt, like for folks who don't, I've noticed that a lot of folks also have it's like if I preempt the criticism and I say something snarky so that I don't look prideful or, haughty or whatever, I need to make it
yeah,
look like I'm not bribing because if I don't, well, it's going to soften the blow of when they'd actually say it. If I say it first, they don't have to. So I don't have to feel
yeah,
that.
yeah, because like going back to my most recent video, I I made the joke that sort of like her going and doing a thing on psychology is like me trying to tell a physicist, like me trying to make definitions in physics, and I needed to use a calculator to multiply 25 by 2, and it's 27, by the way. So it's also a good way to humorize examples as well. So when it comes to self-depreciating humor, it's not, I would say the vast majority of the time, at least in my experience, comes from people who have it's just their sense of humor, and they don't actually genuinely believe what they're saying. Um, and it just depends on, like, well, there's a
Depends on the
guy.
person and the situation. Because,
Yeah,
like, we have a tendency to use the spray bottle emojis a lot on the bridge because there are a lot of people who do say those things and they're trying to preempt some kind of criticism. And then there are people who don't. Like, it's really get to know people. Get to know people on
yeah,
an individual level before you assume what their motivations are. That's kind of the overarching rainbow, the more you know theme for most of this.
yeah,
Um,
yeah,
so
yeah.
I think we did we get to the Jomo paragraph because I didn't. We've talked
No,
about it long enough that I didn't. Okay, so I'll read
yeah,
that. So it says the era of being sad online is defined by a sense of reverse FOMO, a tacit agreement to redefine being cool on the internet through JOMO, the joy of missing out, and then file it under social anxiety. Oh boy. As somebody with social anxiety, we'll talk about that in a second. It is possible, though, that constantly posting about our sadness or anxiety can at times be just as performative as the hashtag positive vibe self care culture that's starting to feel lame. Okay, so here's my issue with this. I hate the framing on this, but I also kind of agree with the idea that being excessively depressed or anxious can be performative online as often as it is genuine. And I've seen this happen where somebody might be in a really good mood, but another person is down. And so, in order to feel empathetic, they might post something like, oh, I had a really bad day too, or something like that. It's not necessarily an attempt to lie, but it's something that just like as social creatures, we do, right?
yeah.
Like we commiserate, we try to relate to each other.
Yeah, and it also you can see a lot of the times I often equate people who are constantly talking in my brain, and it's probably one of the most biggest things that I could be doing, but this is my brain. Sometimes you can't help what your brain thinks. But those people who are constantly going on, oh, I'm getting married, I'm so excited, and they're constantly going on about how they're getting married, or if they're gonna have a baby or something like that. And it just gets to the point where it's sort of like, you're just doing this for attention, aren't you? And I often get that from people who are constantly going on about how depressed they are. It's sort of like at a certain point you kind of sit and roll your eyes and kind of go, okay, cool, right, let's not interact with that person, which is really really sad, because probably a lot of the times that's them screaming out for help.
Mm-hmm.
But they can't get it because, yay, capitalism. like they can't get it because they can't afford to do it because capitalism, because capitalism. But it's sort of like you kind of pick it up, and it's also, I often find that there's also like a preachiness as well. So, for example, when I told everyone and announced that it was my mum who passed away, um, like sometimes when people go, "Oh, a family member of mine passed away," and then you have these people going, "Oh, but they're with Jesus," or if they're saying, "Everyone pray for my mum, she passed away," and then you've got atheists going, "Oh, Jesus doesn't exist, like she's dead, get over it," kind of thing.
You
It's
asked me to
something
pray for
to,
your mom when she passed away, and I'm like, I'm a pagan and you're an atheist.
yeah, so yeah, I mean, I every once in a while I ask you to light a candle for something, because like even though I don't believe it,
Usually
I
what you
still
get
like
is an
it.
oil lamp and incense, but like it's
Yeah,
fine.
close enough. But even though I don't believe it, I like it. It's comforting for me. So like,
I mean, hell,
yeah,
heck, you even did some like graveside, like honoring memorial stuff that I had suggested, like when you were having issues with your mourning. Like those kinds of rituals can be really comforting.
yeah, and even if you
Like
does you
even
know,
beyond genuine belief in the gods, like just even enacting those things can be really comforting.
yeah. So yeah, that's what I'm trying saying. Like sometimes, yeah, it can be quite performative, but we don't know what's going on in that person's head, so we can't exactly go, "Oh, shut up! I'm sick and tired of hearing you about," because that could mean the difference between them having an okay day or a really bad day, or go from a really bad day to an even worse day, or an even worse day to I won't finish
The
that
world
sentence.
is ending. The nuclear bombs have come off. The world is like there's shrapnel raining from the sky. COVID is back.
I
I
mean,
mean, it's
it's
not like COVID ever left, but
no, no. I
COVID
mean,
is
I'm
worse again. People care about COVID again. Like the
yeah,
hysteria for COVID is back.
mm,
Okay,
yeah.
so as somebody who nearly died from COVID, get your vaccines, guys. Like, just don't.
Yes, do
Like,
it, do it,
don't even
and
don't under
do it every 6 months as well.
if you can, if your insurance will cover it.
If you can, go and get a COVID vaccine every 6 months. There's they just because coronaviruses, our immune systems don't hold on to the memories very very well for coronaviruses in general, even not just COVID, but for your basic cold. So every 6 months, go and get a new one. I would get it. I would get a COVID vaccine every week if it meant that I never got COVID again. I had
All
it
right.
once, and I don't ever want it again.
So,
Anyway,
your turn again.
sorry, bit of a.
Hey, like half of this show is digressions. I highly doubt we'll even get all the way through the article,
No.
especially because my big digression is coming up.
Yeah, well, when you're big digression, I'll just go do some cleaning. I'll come back in half an hour, see if you're fine. I'll leave again.
When we were preparing for the stream, I ranted for like 2 hours about this so-called study because like it ugh.
Yes, all right. I'll read the next paragraph. We'll get to the study. You can go click across. I'll go and start doing some cleaning. Maybe get the
Put on a
snakes
wash.
out. Show everyone my cat while you just rant. Okay, so I'll do these next two. All right. There's also been a flood of social media campaigns encouraging people to speak openly about their mental health. The social media hive mind, which shut me to tears when I read
Oh
that.
my god, me too. I was
Oh,
just like, I wanted to punch the article in the face, and then we got through it, and it was like, well, there are a few good points. It's just really, really badly framed.
yeah. This is because, as I said while I was reading this, I was pissed off, so I was not very generous to this article. And then when Ali and I were sat down, she was like, "Oh no, it's got some good points," and I was like, "Oh, maybe I was a bit too harsh on it in my video, so I do
Okay,
retract
like
it
I was like,
slightly."
it's bad and it's badly framed, but also there are some points that are worth discussing. Like there's some things to talk about here. The social media hive mind. Oy.
Yes. Has rushed to express their own genuine emotional distress with the intention of helping to normalize, destigmatize, stigma, and and destigmatize.
Stigma.
Ikeda, can you start a Word document or something and just write down words that I can't say, and then we can make up definitions for these words? So I think this
Just
one's
numma.
and relate to those struggles. In our haste, though, we might have forgotten the fundamental and vital distinction between sad feels and the terms used to diagnose mental disorders like anxiety and depression.
Which is yet another paragraph that I literally read the whole paragraph with Mero when we were reviewing for the stream, and I was like, an entire paragraph that is so badly framed, and then the last sentence is a point that's actually worth making, because anxiety and depression are different than worry or stress or sadness. And like, depression is an entire condition where sadness lingers long beyond the reasonable length of time which one would respond to a triggering event. It can sometimes be caused by triggering events. Sometimes it's might be chemical imbalances in the brain, though there are some really interesting studies coming out that are stating that maybe those hypotheses might not have been as accurate as we thought they were. So we still might not even know what causes depression or anxiety. But like, anxiety is something that will flare up regardless of what's going on sometimes. Like, it can overwhelm you when there's an actual stimulus, like when there's actually something stressful going on, but it can also just out of freaking nowhere, suddenly the world is ending, your heart is pounding, your brain won't turn off. It's a completely different experience than just general stress or worry. And a lot of people do like to use terms like I'm depressed when they're actually just sad. And I do think we need to like be careful with using mental health terms so just broadly, because unfortunately that does contribute to some of the stigma with things like depression and anxiety, where it's like, for me having ADHD, when somebody goes, oh, I'm so ADHD today, like I just keep getting distracted by everything, it's like, no, that's not what ADHD is.
That's
like, it
normal,
is one very tiny experience in the entire swath of things that my brain just doesn't do the same way yours does. And so like, or when somebody's like, I'm so OCD, I kept having to like fix this picture frame, and it's like, I talked to a friend of mine who has to wash his hands 5 times and check the stove 3 before he leaves the house, or he'll have an entire mental breakdown. Like, like these disorders are radically different than the colloquial, just offhanded use people have. So like, there is a good point here in that there is an overuse of that kind of language when there's a severity difference between what people are experiencing when they call them these things and like what actually is going on.
Bratty, Bucharest. I apologize. I just destroyed your name. Thank you so much for the video. I'm bad at talking. I agree. For me, I relate, not agree. Okay, that's another word. I relate. So it's really great to have a resource to send instead of trying to explain BIID linking academic writing because yes, it's a very fascinating condition. If I could find someone willing to talk to me and come on my stream and do a stream talking about their BIID, I would be so excited. It'd be really cool, because I never was able to find somebody who had BIID to talk to, because they're fucking
There's
rare.
There's not a lot of people who have it.
There's not a lot.
On the point that I was just making, by the way, Ostrogothic says the classic, oh, everyone's a little XYZ to downplay your condition, which absolutely, yes, absolutely. Like, everybody's a little ADHD. No, they're not. Your brain physically looks different than mine on a brain scan. Like, shut up, sit down, go actually educate yourself, talk to people who actually have it, especially adults. Like, no, physiologically, like the prefrontal cortex, my prefrontal cortex is significantly less dense than a neurotypical person's, because congenitally I was born that way. I was born to, like, my body, my genes caused me to not develop the same way. And so my brain works differently. And like, I need medical help to do some things that other people do. And I also have an immense level of creativity and hyperfocus and other cool stuff. Like, there are benefits and there are drawbacks. But the point is that, like, no, everybody's not a little ADHD. People get distracted sometimes, and you need to not equate the two, because it's a completely different set of things. Also, people don't understand when they're like, oh, I'm so distracted because of ADHD. They don't understand like the hyper focus component. Like, the other side of that is I get interested in something and can't stop.
Yeah,
Like,
that's perseverance that I talked about in my latest video as well.
yeah, like my brain literally, like if I'm getting high dopamine off of something I'm doing, there is a chance that some switch will go off in my brain and suddenly I'm not doing anything else. And if somebody interrupts me, I'll get pissed. Like
Yeah.
Marrow has literally had to message me to get me to go eat lunch when I'm working because I got really like involved in something that I was working on and just like completely lost track.
Yeah.
So like
Um, um,
it's like the other side of distraction is the inability to stop. And so again, just even that tiny little nuance with one condition, think about the level of nuance that we're talking about here. Social media just does not lend itself well to that nuance quite often. But again, it also depends on which platform you're talking about. You can get a way longer post in Facebook or like an entire video on YouTube than you would on some place like TikTok or Twitter.
Yeah. Ali, just a yes or no, please. You don't explain it, but question: if you could cure and remove all of your ADHD from your brain, would you?
No, absolutely not.
Yeah, me too.
It makes me a big part of who I am. Like it is
Yeah.
100% a big part of who I am. Like I would not be the same person without it. My brain doesn't work that like I think differently than other people because of it. Like
Yeah.
there's a certain level of my creativity that is directly like a consequence of my disorder.
Yeah. Yes. All right. We'll keep going, shall we?
Mhm.
Uh, people label. Oh, hang on. I'll do the dramatic speak. People label their sadness as depression and their nervousness as anxiety when the problems they're facing often don't reflect those psychological problems. If healthy people are convinced that they're depressed, they ultimately identify with the glamorized social media posts aggravating
Potes.
posts aggravating the phenomenon even more. Jinan Jennifer Jadale, a graduate student from the International School in Lebanon and co-author of a 2017 study that tracked social media posts about mental health. All right, do you want to click across and I'll leave for about an hour and a half?
Okay, so we're not going to get super deep, but I did actually take a look at this study. And there are a few red flags with it. One of them is that I could not find an impact factor for this journal. Mara, would you like to explain to my audience who might not have seen your How to Do Research on Science video what impact factor is?
Okay, so I'm more concentrated on the scientific thing. So
I mean,
it's
I did go to school with an undergrad, but like,
yeah.
yeah, they're complicated stuff.
So an impact factor is how many times on average a article is cited that is
Or a
published in
journal is
or
cited,
in
yeah.
or an article in a journal is cited. So for example, if you have the journal of 100s, call it like that, and it has 100 articles in this journal, and each and there's 100 citations from that particular journal was taken, it's got an impact factor of 1. So for example, you could have each article could be cited once, so it's got 100 citations in that journal, or there could be one article that's really, really good, so it gets cited 100 times, but all the other ones don't get cited at all. It's still got an impact factor of 1.
So basically, the higher an impact factor is for a journal that is on a more general topic, such as, say, like nature or science,
Mm,
like the higher the impact factor is, the more reputable the journal is, because it
yeah,
means that not only did these articles and papers get through peer review, but also peers built on that research. They felt that the research was reputable enough that they cited it themselves for their own papers.
yeah. But that like it works reasonably well. So nature has a ridiculous impact factor. I think it's like 17, or I can't remember. No, it's 40. I can't remember. It's been a while since I looked. Meaning that on average, a article published in Nature is cited 40 times. So that means that you have to have a really fucking good uh, article to be published in Nature. Like that's why everyone gets really excited when they get published in Nature, is because they reject 99.9%
really
of
good,
the
and or connections, because there was that big scandal with
yeah.
with Nature, I think it was, where like the one guy in Taiwan faked a whole bunch of his data and then like got a scientist friend to vouch for him, and suddenly he was published in Nature, even though there were major problems with the paper.
Yeah, so it's, you know, politics happens everywhere, but as a general rule, if they
Generally,
get
generally the higher the impact factor, the more reputable the journal. So if a journal
yeah,
doesn't have an impact factor at all, that's one really big red flag. Which, I
what the hell?
initially thought that this journal had an impact factor, but then I figured out that the journal that had an impact factor actually was one word off of
Yeah,
the title for this one. So I went and
yeah,
I looked
Ali,
for
I'm just gonna interrupt quickly. Nature, thank you to okay, I'm not
that's
even going
really high. Thalia.
yeah, how do you say their name?
That's Thalia.
Thalia, okay, thank you. That's a cool name. I would have gone O-I-E-I-E-I.
It's in Greek.
Nature has an impact factor of 64.8 in 2022. That's fucking huge.
That's
So yeah,
insane.
they have to be really picky because they've got such a good reputation. And if they continuously publish shit, yeah, so that's why you've got to have a really high like impact factor. But the Lancet also released that Andrew Wakefield's article on autism and vaccines. So
Mhm.
it can, they do very occasionally, even the best journals very occasionally do release bad. And it's a massive controversy when really high quality journals release bad um, release bad uh, articles. Yeah,
So,
so you
but anyway, like the point is that this guy. So I went and I tried to go find the publisher, and when I went to the publisher's website, I found 5 different journals they published, and each and every one of them was available online, and they all had the supposed boards that had like decided them, but no submission guidelines, which is a red flag. But also, not only that, but this journal was not registered on any of the journal tracking lists, which is why I didn't have an impact factor. So yeah,
Yeah.
red flags on the journal to begin with. Now it might just be a shuttered journal, but like it says university publications, right? So you'd think this is attached to some university, but it's not.
Mm. Yes. Do you want to go all the way down to the bottom of the article as to what was my biggest red flag? Let's just go all the way
Okay, so
down.
I think we do need to talk really quick about the methodology though, because this was where my red flag went off was when I started reading their methodology, because like you read
Mhm.
the background and stuff. Um, so where my red flag went off is I started reading the whole paper, which where Mara went straight down to the citations, which is the red flag that she's talking about. But like if you read the thing here, so they talked about the counseling center of the University of Balamund, and then they went. The center aimed to address issues of common interest. Consequently, special attention was given to student learning. The only thing that actually talks about methodology here is over the past year, the counseling center initiated dialogue with a number of students in order to learn more about the problem of glamorization of mental health disorders on social media from the perspective of youth. So it's like, okay, so basically a counseling center talked to some students, but then we find out that it's focus groups. And it's like 3 focus groups of 11 students. And then it says 2 case studies were conducted in the form of written interviews. They answered a prepared list of questions that were sent to them, but then we get no data whatsoever in the analysis portion at all of what those questions were.
Mm.
They just give us some anecdotal quotes.
Yep.
So we get a few like during a discussion of XYZ, how active they were and what platforms they use most often. So they have a couple of quotes like directly from a few questions, and then we have during the conversation about mental health and its image. So we have no idea without this in the methodology. The reason that this is a major problem without this in the data set is we have no idea whether or not these researchers were leading these students to these conclusions or not, because it's very easy in terms of ethics to lead someone to a specific conclusion with the framing of your question. There's a reason why like ethics boards and stuff usually have to review these sorts of things, especially when you're dealing with students.
Hmm. Yeah.
And then, okay, trigger warning really quick. Again, we still have the trigger warning for self-help, like for self-harm. But take a look at this, because this is another major concern. Note the citations.
Oh yeah, this was the thing that made me just go, yeah, this is a terrible article.
So we have the
Can you zoom in?
Independent.
Can you zoom in?
I am very zoomed in already. All right,
You
let's
can't
see.
go any closer. There we go. That's
Okay,
better.
so we have the same journal that I just talked about problems, which he's also been published in again. We have the Guardian.
The
We
Guardian, Business
have the
Insider.
Independent. We have Business Insider.
I think
Notice
there's a
what's
Netflix.
notably absent. Yeah, selfharm.co.uk. There's just the University of Ballamond. There's a Psychology Today blog. It's not even an article, it's a blog.
It's a blog. Because as soon as I went down and looked at it, I was just like, no.
Does anybody here see the problem with these citations being in a paper?
It's a bit of a small one. It's a little. If you don't know, if you can't figure it out, there's no academic articles being cited.
I think there's one.
Where?
She cites herself right here.
Oh, she cites herself, which doesn't count. Really, self citations aren't really.
She cites herself. So there's one paper that was published somewhere that was cited here.
Yeah. There's something from the WHO, which is kind of okay. I'm more, but yeah. That was, as soon as I saw that, I was like, I don't give a shit how good this article was.
I was looking, how did this get past peer review? My rage in this was, what the heck?
Yeah. Yes. That was.
How did this get past peer review?
It didn't, because it's not published in a journal.
Well, I mean, it's published in a journal. We have no idea if it's a pay-to-play journal or if it's just shuttered. We have no idea. The point is that I had a hard enough time finding information out about this journal and who the publisher was and stuff, just that alone. Now, keep in mind, the majority of the points in this article hinge on this study. That this person is one of two that they quote through the entire thing.
Yeah. Yeah. That's so even though she made some good points, so I kind of feel bad about the fact that I was like, it's just a crap article.
The study was terrible. The study made very few, if any, good points. It was just horribly thrown together. I am shocked that they got anybody to write about it.
Yeah, I would think it is probably pay to play kind of thing. Yeah.
Well, again, allegedly. We have no idea. These are our opinions.
Yeah, these are our opinions. Don't quote us on it. We just personally we both think it's a shit study, and
at the very least, the study is the methodology of that study is terrible.
Mm-hmm. We don't know anything about the conclusions. They didn't have a whole series of questions what
Sam, when something is shuttered, that means that it's been shut down due to financial issues. So if a project gets shuttered, that means that it gets basically put in a box and never spoken about again because there wasn't enough funding to do it.
Yeah. So it's just one of those. Yeah, it was just very much, we sat down and we just, it's the first thing I do, that's literally the first thing I do when I read a study, is that I read the abstract, and then I go down and have a look at the.
Was there even an abstract on that? It just had a bunch of background. I don't even think it had an abstract.
No, it didn't have an abstract.
It didn't even have how did this get past peer review?
Can you go open it again? I don't think it did have an abstract.
I don't think it did. I mean, it's not labeled as one.
Yeah, no, that's an abstract, even though it's not labeled. So an abstract is basically what you're researching. So it sort of goes, this question I want to ask, are plants green? Okay, so ask the question, gives a little bit of background, sort of in the study we want to investigate, are plants green? The background is that many people have reported seeing green plants. So
however, there are also red plants.
Yeah, however, there's also red plants. So we now have to ask the question, So we are going to investigate why plants are green and if red plants exist. That's basically a terrible.
That would be a very
study.
messy study.
A very
well, here
messy study.
I do want to make an issue with the article, though. That study did not track a damn thing about mental health. Just so y'all know, it tracked no social media posts. They mentioned social media posts, but it didn't track anything. It was a case study.
Yeah.
They did focus groups. That's all it was. They interviewed a bunch of people and asked them what their opinions were, mostly students.
Yeah, which is also another problem because students aren't a big group of people. Like
But that
it's
also
not
tells
a
me the author of this probably didn't even read that so-called paper because they claim that it did something that it very clearly didn't.
So King Base McPop-Tart says, if it didn't have an abstract, did it have a surrealism?
Just so you guys know, by the way, the reason we didn't review some of the later stuff in there is because it brings up a topic that could potentially get my channel shuttered completely if I were to talk about it.
Yeah.
And there's also some very triggering memes of things like razor blades and like cut marks and all kinds of stuff. So like we just decided to kind of spare you guys that. I went past it really quickly. But like they have like 2 big long paragraphs where they give like an interview with an individual person that they give their opinion. And I had issues with both of them, but I've decided not to talk too much about it because the problem is talking, even if you're trying to debunk it, talking about certain topics can cause problems with YouTube because YouTube is a Christian wine mom at this point.
Yeah, I got my a warning put on my channel that I appealed, and they said nope, and it was a short where I was debunking a lie about Pfizer vaccines. So, and it was a short. It would have taken you less than a minute to watch to realize that I was basically repeating what the WHO was saying. But they said, no, you're spreading vaccine misinformation, which is a massive issue with a lot of people who are debunking things on YouTube, because the people doing the debunking are getting dinged while the people doing the lies are being kept alive. Yes, I know that
there's more money in lying.
There is. It's so annoying. There is so like just a perfect example is Blairs BIID video.
Well, you'd think if the study did what they claimed in the article that it did, that it would have done that, but no, they didn't. They posted like 4 memes, I think, and like the case studies, but like they weren't tracking anything. That's not what that study was. It was case studies.
Yeah. And not particularly good ones because they.
I agree. I'm not going to read that out loud because I don't want Dear Susan to come for me, but
yeah,
I agree with what Ocean Star just said there. All right, so I guess it's my turn to read.
Starting to verge on the philosophical. What is green?
What is green, in fact? Does it exist? The answer is only kind of. Depending on in what context you are discussing the color green. Are we talking about pigmentation? Are we talking about light and light spectrum? Are we talking about human vision? Or are we talking about the vision of another creature?
Are we talking about
is this a dog that we are talking about?
Is the sun green? Yes, actually it peaks in the green spectrum. But it looks white. But it's actually peaks in this green spectrum, which is why chlorophyll is green. It acts kind of like a sunscreen by reflecting back green pigmentation, so it doesn't destroy the plant cells. Found that was really interesting.
All right, so let's get into the next bits of the article. Social media has increasingly blurred the line between what is authentic and what is performance, even within ourselves. Another good point, because there is actually some truth in that. That there is actually some truth in that, especially if you're a public figure. But I think even for the average person, like you're not posting, for most people anyway, you're not going to be posting the gigantic pile of dishes that are in your sink, but you might have cleaned up the counter next to it to like show how pretty the food you just made was.
Yeah.
Right? Like there, and if you did post the picture of the gigantic thing in your sink, there are generally motivations as to why you did that.
Yeah. So
the point is that you don't ever post something on social media without the knowledge that it's going to get some kind of attention, either from people you know or from randos on the internet. And there's usually a certain kind of attention you're looking for, whether that's support, whether that's encouragement, whether that's, commiseration, whether that's, you want people to be impressed. The point is that like being social is performative, but social media has kind of amped that up a little bit because more people than you ever would have met in your lifetime 100 years ago might know your name by tomorrow.
Yeah.
And that's kind of terrifying, but it's also really exciting for a lot of people.
Yeah. And I made a point in my last video about how incredibly powerful talking about things that we struggle with can be,
especially as public figures.
Especially as public figures. Like, for example, I was listening to Skeptics with a K, which is, remind me, I have to put a link to them in the description. And one of the people were talking about their about a diagnosis of a problem with their eating. And this is I would say this is a trigger warning, just to be honest. We'll call it
Are we talking about ARFID?
Yeah, we're talking about ARFID. And it's basically what we would consider to be extreme picky eating. So basically,
it's a full-blown eating disorder, mind you.
It is, yeah. It's and it basically they'll only eat like 5 or 6 things. And somebody in my person, and if it wasn't for me listening to that thing, I decided, oh, well, this sounds like a really interesting topic to talk about on my channel. So I did some research into it, and they were talking about what it meant. And while I was researching it, I was like, that sounds like somebody who's in my personal life. And I was also talking to somebody who was talking to me about certain things, and they're like, oh, I only really like this. And I was like, do you have ARFID? And they're like, oh yeah, I watched my video, went, oh yeah, that sounds like me. And so at least 2 people got diagnosed with ARFID because of my video. And so
proper representation and visibility can be really important.
Very important, especially with situations where people get in situations where people are often being derided.
I feel the same way about like How to ADHD. Like that channel makes me feel seen. Like there is so little discussion of like AFAB ADHD because it often manifests very differently.
Yeah.
But like, she does such a good job of talking about some of the things that I struggle with, and like, talking about like bringing experts on and coaches and things like that. Like honestly, like that channel was a really big influence when I first got diagnosed. It really helped me learn how to deal with my disorder better.
Yeah, same. And also she made a really good point where she was like, a lot of the times they talk about and if you have children with ADHD, and they will talk to the parents or the teachers.
But then they don't. But they pretend that like if you're a kid with ADHD, you probably grew up into an adult with ADHD. Like it doesn't just, people don't quote unquote grow out of it most of the time. If you think you've grown out of it, you probably live a lifestyle that's conducive to your ADHD.
Yeah. So and it was a really good point, because I agreed with her. Sort of like, when I was first diagnosed with ADHD, I had no way. Like there was probably Attitude Mag and How to ADHD were the 2 things that were aimed at adults who just got diagnosed with ADHD. So
especially with AFAB people, a lot of people end up having like kids, and that's how they get diagnosed.
Yeah, that's what happened.
I got lucky. Like my counselor noticed that I had ADHD like symptoms that were like that I acted very similar to one of my partners who was diagnosed, and was like, you might want to go get checked. And she spent months trying to convince me, and thank the God she did. But like legitimately, that kind of representation can really help you, because like after I had a hard time believing it at first until I started watching How to ADHD, reading Attitude Mag, that sort of thing. Now, granted, Attitude Mag has some problems too, so like don't take everything they say as gospel. They sometimes promote pseudoscience, but most of their stuff is decent most of the time.
Most.
But anyway, so talking about this whole performativity and authenticity, like while posting our upsetting ass vibes may feel more real, for some it might just be a new way to fit in online. There is some truth in that. Like for some people, you might be looking for support, you might be trying to display your authenticity, but some people also just like, again, there's that social impetus. If somebody is depressed in the party, it might feel wrong to be happy.
Yeah.
So like this isn't unique to social media is my point. Like this is just something we do as humans.
Yeah, no, it's true.
So then we have, by all numerical accounts, there's never been more people reporting mental health issues than right now, especially the young demographic that dominates social media. A recent Pew Research study, an actually potentially decent study, found that 7 in 10 teens think anxiety and depression are the biggest problems their peers face. Gee, I wonder why that is. I wonder what teenagers might have to be anxious about. It's not like our planet is rapidly heating up and cooling down at exactly the same time. It's not like the magnetic poles are like aren't getting messed with at all. It's not like fracking isn't like collapsing the ground underneath people's houses randomly. There's this kind of overarching thing. Like it starts with a C. Do you remember what the word is for that again? It's climate something.
Climate. It's weather, but a bit more like trends in weather.
For those who don't know, we're memeing right now. We know it's climate change. Like literally, like I have a good friend who studies it. Like seriously, like climate. Like I wonder what I like. Not only just that.
Last week was the hottest week on record, or like in 100,000 years. The average global temperature on the planet was the hottest week in 100,000 years. It was breaking records every day for the past 100,000 years or something like that. It's
almost like the global climate is changing. Like it couldn't just be me.
And a lot of people go, oh, why, they went from global warming to climate change. They're obviously lying. No, it's the same thing. It's just so many people are like, oh, it's really cold outside. It's the coldest day we've seen in 45 years. Therefore, we could use some of this global warming. And it's like, no, this is because of fucking global warming. Like the Arctic blast that Texas went through the other year, that was due to climate change.
It's because of the heat pockets pulling the Arctic cooled pockets off of the poles, basically.
Yeah. So
I mean, that's an oversimplification of complex weather patterns, but that's more or less what's happening. Is like warm pockets in the oceans, especially, are starting to pull some of that pooled cold in the poles off, which is causing accelerating ice like melting and all kinds of other things. It's really complicated. But the point is that it's massively changing how our weather systems works, which is causing extreme heat and extreme cold and extreme storms. So for those of you who are having to deal with the hurricanes and like seeing how much worse they're getting, like where categories that 2 decades ago, like your parents would have never thought like that they'd see, like categories 4s and 5s are happening almost yearly now.
Yeah, and
when they used to be really rare occurrences.
Yeah.
Like they had to create new categories for how big some of these storms have gotten because of climate change.
Australia.
So like but that's like just the first. That's just like the first thing, though. Like that's just then you've got like the wildfires. You've got the economic issues. You've got things like the war in Ukraine. Like teenagers have a lot of stuff to worry about, and on top of that, we're more interconnected than ever. So like the dumb stuff you do as a kid, which like all of us did dumb stuff as a kid, but people who do dumb stuff as kids are far more likely to have a permanent record that they did dumb stuff as kids now, which is incredibly stressful on top of it. Like we were kind of the half online generation, but like the generation that came after us, like most of my like I've met like Zoomer fans who never knew a time before the internet.
Yeah, there was that kid who did the what was it? He was one of the first ever instances of online systematic bullying, because he one of his classmates, like he filmed himself just playing around with the lightsaber, and his mates found the footage and uploaded it, and like the kid had to move school like 3 or 4 times or that kind of thing.
Ikeda with the $5 super chat says, "Come on, humans, we can top the red spot of Jupiter."
Well, considering the red spot of Jupiter is shrinking, eventually we'll be able to, which is a sad thing. I like the big red spot. But yeah, so this kid's my age, bit older, I think. And then you've got like the system, but nowadays nobody gives a shit about systemic bullying of kids online. It still happens continuously, but it doesn't. thankfully, in a way,
again,
thankfully.
especially public figures. Like, people don't care about
Yeah.
the relentless bullying of public figures, but there have been, like, not just even like YouTubers, but also like pseudo celebrities and smaller celebrities. There was an idol, a Japanese idol, like 2 or 3 years ago, who ended up unaliving themselves over social media harassment, over like
Mhm.
disingenuous editing that was put up on some kind of like Japanese dating reality show. Like,
Yeah.
this kind of online systemic bullying, people think it's okay. And like, people just forget that there's another human being on the other side of that screen, that that name and avatar like isn't just a giant pile of money, they're a person.
Yeah.
Like, they're
And
not
I
just a string of letters, numbers, and an avatar, they're a person.
Yeah, and I have to admit, I have added to that with especially going with 2 videos going after Blair about her
Well, I
takes
mean,
on
you're
being
not
our
bullying
idol.
her though. You're not like
I
attacking her personally, really.
I don't think I am. I still want everyone to know that I do recognize her as a human being and stuff, and when she was saying, "Oh, I'm getting death and rape threat." Oh, sorry, that was bad. I'm sorry, that was a trigger warning, I apologize. But she was getting a lot of threats and people are laughing about it. I was like, "No, I can absolutely see people doing that to her, and I absolutely will be no, don't do that. That's wrong."
Don't
So I
harass
just
Illuminati. Like, it again,
don't do it.
if you want to like talk about bad ideas, there's a distinct difference between talking about bad ideas and going after somebody personally.
Yeah,
And also,
and
talking about your experiences being hurt by someone also is not the same thing as bullying someone. There's a distinct difference between drama and the thing that starts with A and ends with use.
yes. So I do really want to everyone to know that I don't want anything bad to happen to her. I just want her to not continue doing what she's doing. I want her to stop. I don't want yeah, I it's sort of it's a complicated thing. I kind of don't want her to be on the internet anymore for her own sake, and also for the sake of the people that she's hurt, as well. So
So, beyond young people, the CDC cites the oft repeated statistic that 1 in 5 Americans experience mental illness in a given year. The American Psychiatric Association reported an increase of anxiety and depression among boomers in recent years, too. We just went all over all the systemic reasons for that.
yeah,
You know,
yeah,
sometimes we pathologize responses to external stimuli. Like,
yeah,
maybe there's a reason, like, a lot of boomers are being forced to go back into the workforce as their retirement plans and things are dwindling. And as easy as it is to be like, ah, they screwed everything up for the rest of us, remember that people tend to vote in their own best interest. And, like, a lot of those folks ended up, like, in the positions that they're in now because they grew up in a booming economy and don't realize entirely how things have changed.
yeah.
Have a little
And
bit of have a little bit of compassion for some of the people who vote in these bad policies, because some of them aren't necessarily dyed in the wool like bad people. They're just voting in what they think is in their own best interest. Not
mm,
everybody is like, not every conservative is anti-trans. Not every person who's like fiscally conservative has like abortion as a wedge issue. A lot of them do, but some of
mm,
them just, like, in terms of fiscal policy, some of them were just worried about their retirements and they were tricked into believing that they would lose everything if they voted in somebody who wanted to say increase food stamp benefits or something.
yeah,
Again, that doesn't mean we shouldn't argue with the rhetoric, but like, people who are like, it's all the boomers' fault. It's like, first
yeah,
off, let's not put all the pressure on the younger generations to fix everything. Like, Gen Z is going to be our saviors is just as damaging as screw the boomers. But
mm,
also, like, consider that there are reasons why people do things beyond just bigotry.
yeah. And also, like, one of the fastest
Yeah,
growing,
people vote in what they believe to be their best interest, and
yeah,
sometimes that means that they've been lied to. In fact, most of them have.
yeah. One of in Australia, the biggest
Nimona,
grow
that's not entirely true. It's not very like the western side of Washington could get hit that way, but Seattle, the Puget Sound actually has kind of a narrow, like, canyon-ish, for lack of a better way to put it. It's an inland sea, the Puget Sound is. So there isn't very high likelihood that we'll get hit by a tsunami. Even in the case of an earthquake, there's not quite enough water for that. Like, we could get some high waves, but no, like, we're actually pretty sheltered from that. However, the western side of Washington has been hit by tsunamis,
yeah. Um, so one of the biggest
like along the
growing
coastline.
one of the biggest growing, houseless populations, in Australia are middle-aged women. So yeah, there's an increase of anxiety and depression amongst boomers because they're suddenly realizing that they're losing a lot of the wealth that they've accumulated.
Not just wealth, but security. Like,
And
and
security as
also,
well.
like, the amount that they might have put away, 30
Is
years ago is no longer enough to sustain them.
Yeah,
But, like, our
exactly.
generation is facing I don't think I can retire until, like, what, 68? And, like,
Yeah.
Zoomers, there are Zoomers that's like, "You can't retire until you're 70," and it's like, am I even gonna be alive then? Like,
Yeah.
what's this, like, about being able to sit on your, dragon's egg and, like, go dragon's nest and, like, go somewhere?
Yeah, and
Forget
it's
about
and it's
vacations. Most of us, like, don't even have our own apartments anymore. Most of us are living multiple roommates, and, like, there's a reason our generation's not having very many kids.
Yeah, and it's sort of the whole thing is, like, a lot of this can be fixed by, reducing wealth inequality. Like, if you started going, "Okay, the minimum wage is a person who can afford their own house and put money aside to go on a holiday." That should be the minimum wage. That's why everyone's arguing for, UBI, and initially, I was a little bit iffy about it, and there is still some
Well,
things
my
about the
problem is when
UBI.
UBI is meant to replace all social programs, because the moment you do that, like, then you're now if a
Yeah,
conservative
it's not
government gets elected and wants to get rid of it, now you not only have all the social programs gone, but now, like, you have now one thing for them to attack
yeah,
instead
it's
of,
sort
like, a
of
whole bunch of them.
Well, and also, people who have disabilities, for example, need more money. Like, let's just be honest, like, you can't have a person who's able to go out and work and have a bit of fun and everything like that, get the same amount as a person who requires an electric wheelchair to survive. So I also have a problem with there's problems with the UBI. I have sort of there is
It would
I
need to be in addition to other social programs.
yeah, yeah, it should be a thing but the case studies, like the trials that they've done with the UBI has just absolutely the anxiety, depression plummets, education goes up, more people stay at
People
home with
pay
their
off their debt
kids.
with it.
Yeah, it's like there was only good things came out of UBIs, and then they were like, "Oh no, we got to stop that. It's bad. The trials were no, we got to stop it." And everyone's like, "But I was having a good life." So,
Ikeda, like, actually, yes, I do think it's possible, but it's gonna take a lot of work from a lot of people, and it's gonna take a lot of us to speak up, and not just speak up with your vote, but also, those of us who are not disabled, those of us who have enough ability to be able to go out and protest, people who have the ability to, call your Congress people if you're in the US, or, the equivalent of communication with, like, the parliamentary parties or other things. I don't know how it works in other countries, but, like, the
yeah,
point is make your voice heard. Fight for it.
mm,
Like, we have to care enough beyond just talking about it online and talking about it, like, on Twitter or in comment sections or on Facebook or on Discord or whatever. We have to be willing to put the work in. And
yeah,
work means get offline and move forward elsewhere too.
yeah. And like a perfect example for this is, I live near a school, and somebody rang the local MP and complained about the school's bell going bing, bing, bing. So they changed it to the fleur de lis. And and anyway, the school's been getting a lot of complaints from people because every hour they're hearing "doo-loo-loo-loo-loo, doo-loo-loo-loo," and it was just driving everyone insane. So people ended up ringing the MP to make the school to change. Even though, like, I know it's a silly example, but it shows that how one voice or one phone call can make a difference for a lot of people. Um, yeah, so I know it's like a school bell, but it just kind of gives you using your voice is very important, to the point of just driving the local neighborhood insane for listening to the fleur de lis about 400 million times a day.
We are more anxious and depressed than ever before, or at least talking about it more freely. But the trendiness of sad online culture may lead to wrongful self-diagnoses and an inadvertent trivialization of serious illnesses. I'll let you take the next two paragraphs.
Uh, So I agree with that sentence, by the way. Oh, two sentences. More and more teenagers are convinced that depression, anxiety, and bipolarity are cool or can make you special, says Rolla Jadale, or
The
another.
person who wrote the not study study.
Oh, yeah, says that person. Another author of the social media study and professor of sciences at the University of Balamand in Lebanon. The study focused on a specific type of Tumblr and Instagram post, which blatantly glorifies MH issues through specific hashtags, brackets, the type.
This is not a great article that links to.
Okay. I didn't click along to that one. I think I was too ragey by the end of that. By portraying them as appealing on social media, the research suggests more people identify with these misinterpretations, which can lead to all sorts of harm.
And then there's a tweet here that says, "Can we stop romanticizing anxiety and depression? It's not trendy, cute, or special. Having mental health problems isn't beautiful and is not something to be a stupid trend on an app called TikTok. You don't want anxiety and depression. They are not quirky traits." Which, again, I can kind of agree with that sentiment to a certain degree.
Yeah.
Like, it's not a bad thing to talk about your anxiety and your depression, especially with people you trust. Might not be the best thing to advertise them constantly on social media. Like, there's a balance between, talking about your problems sometimes and like inundating them, and like, that sort of thing can also be difficult and tricky to navigate, especially if you're neurodivergent. But there's not a problem with talking about specific struggles, with commiserating, with connecting online. But there is a tendency for some folks to run off with that to a certain extent. And like, I don't even know if it was trendy back then, but like, they talk about, like, later in this article, I'm not sure, we're at the hour and a half mark, so I'm not sure if we're going to get through the whole thing, but they talk about like sad girl culture and like the sort of, hey, it's okay to be sad if you're a chick, and like that. It was, smile more is a thing that women get told all the time, and AFAB people get told all the time, regardless of their gender identity. Like, it's not acceptable to be sad unless you are beautifully, gracefully sad. And there's like the romanticization with like mental illness with artists as well. But when you talk about these sorts of things, there's a difference between accurate representation of what you are going through and commiserating with other people, and the sort of like performative, you have to be depressed to be a good artist kind of ideas.
Yeah.
And so I think they're concerned that talking about it is leading to that, but I disagree. I actually think that the same problems with representation that have always existed, because like back when media was primarily limited to movies that you had to go to a theater to see a second time, because VHSs didn't even exist. Like, people don't even realize how recent of an invention even VHSs are compared to even something like DVDs or streaming. Like, there was a good chunk of human history with in regards to cinema where you could only see a movie if it came back to theaters, like if it was re-released. Like, if you didn't get to see it during its original run, you'd have to go see it when it came back again.
Yeah.
If it ever came back. If it wasn't popular enough, then a theater wouldn't screen it again. And so, like, even then you get romanticizing of things like ASPD, antisocial personality disorder. You get bad, unhealthy representation of things like autism, where like you have the savant syndrome thing, like the good doctor. Like, there are just a blatant misrepresentation like music.
Yeah, well, for example, a very good example of bad representation of ASPD is Sherlock, the one that has Cumberbatch in it. He was always going on about how he was a sociopath or something like that. No, I don't care. And it's like, no, you're not, dude. You're not a sociopath. you're very clinical, but you're not being you like if I was to sit and look and watch.
Dexter's another one.
Yeah, I haven't seen Dexter as well, but
Dexter romanticizes sociopathy quite a bit. And I have a friend who has ASPD who is like, these things are dangerous. Like, no. There's actually a really good, because I know there are systems in the audience right now. Split's another example of really bad mental health representation. Folks with OSDD and DID were set back so far because of Split. But like, again, there are these ideas where like there's a romanticization in Split where like they assume alters can physically change the shape of your body and like make you mutate into a beast man. But then there's also like alters also can be radically different people. And it's like there was somewhat decent representation in parts of it, but then there's also the beast TM, the protective alter. Like it just like goes to shit because it's like, oh, well, all systems must be dangerous. Or you get like misrepresentations of schizophrenia, or you get romanticization of villains like you do with like Joker. There are there's a problem with representation generally, and social media is just a symptom of it because people respond to their environment.
Yeah.
My point is that you could get these kinds of glorifications of mental illness generally. We just didn't call it by its name.
Yeah.
Like, this has been going back forever.
And it's not good. Like, yeah, and that was something that Blair was bringing up, and also in her BIID video, she was like, there was a really good article. I didn't quite read it again because I was too busy doing other things as well, because it also had nothing to do with BIID.
Yeah, the Nothing About Us Without Us article. The only good point Blair ever made in that video, and it wasn't even her own words.
Yeah, and that she was talking about how people like in like having conversations with people who have this particular disability is an important thing to do, and totally 100% agree with her. Where the hell was the BID representation? Because
Saying I'm shilling my novel.
And it was sort of we needed to have more conversations about we do need to have more conversations about people who have a disability. Currently I have a person who in my personal life who might have Lewy body dementia, and one of the symptoms is schizophrenia type presentation, yeah. And a lot of people are like, oh, they're schizophrenic, you know, just be careful, they're going to hurt you. And this person would not hurt a bloody fly.
I mean, people with mental health issues are more likely to get hurt than they are to be like to harm other people. Like, there are some disorders that can be dangerous. Again, ASPD is one of them. But like the majority of people with mental health issues, like they're more likely to hurt themselves or to get hurt by somebody taking advantage of them.
Yeah. So it's sort of
I mean, the ones that are portrayed as like dangerous is what I mean. I'm not saying anybody who has mental health issues is more likely to hurt yourself. I'm just saying that, like, the ones that are portrayed negatively, the majority of them, and then we're glorifying the dangerous one. So, like, the point is anything that's unusual is exciting, and media is going to misrepresent it, and we need to work on that. Like, as creatives, we need to work on that. But it's not a problem unique to social media, and I think that's the issue, is this entire article reads like a get off my lawn take from somebody who doesn't quite get the internet. Like, again, there are points in here that are valid, but a lot of them either can come down to capitalism, things like monetizing mental illness, or they come down to like just general misrepresentation in media that has been going on since time began. Like, since media became a thing, there's been misrepresentation of how people act and what things are like.
Yeah. I mean,
and if anything, social media has given us an unprecedented ability for people who do have these things to speak ourselves if it's possible for us. Like, you have autism, you can talk about your experiences. I have ADHD. We're not just boogeyman in the closet or people that are getting shunted off into some room or another, where everybody who is quote unquote special needs gets put into a box, like one single classroom. That's what they did when I was in school. Like, it's to the point where we can speak for ourselves, and where like individual education plans are being done in some spaces. Like, there is this unprecedented ability for good information to get out there and for people to communicate their own experiences and to see the work of experts. And so, like, I think that should not be discounted, that the power of that should not be discounted.
Yeah. And also with just because I also have ADHD, I'm autistic and ADHD. Autistic very recently. I just became aware of it 3-4 months ago, max.
We've suspected it for a good year, though.
I've expected it for years.
You started talking about suspecting it about a year ago.
Yeah, no, I had a person who hired me whose children were autistic, and she was going, "You're autistic," and this was 10-15 years ago. So it's been floating around for many years. And anyway, when I have to go through the gold standard, but but my therapist was like, yeah, no, you're definitely autistic. And she goes, and so when I was I have just problems with trying to talk about and separate the two disorders, because as I've gotten older, my autism is becoming more and more obvious. Like, it's really weird. I don't know if that's just as a result of me understanding ADHD and being able to control it, and then all of a sudden my autism is going hello, or if it's just,
I mean,
you
as you
know, I
get
don't.
older, you stop caring as much about masking too.
It's like, but it's sort of yeah, but it's sort of one of those things where people are like people are like um I've lost my train of thought, so continue on.
And we like I wasn't that there's the ADHD thought. Like it's just floating away. I wasn't done with you yet.
Goodbye.
So it's your turn to read. I did all of the reading for the last section.
In these jaded times, memeing, tweeting, Instagramming, and TikToking about anxiety and depression isn't just for coping. It can act as a disguise of honesty, especially to youth desperately seeking authenticity and connection in a virtual social environment that tends to distort it. Sorry about that.
I mean, in a world where
yeah, so I don't know.
again, there's always going to be a subgroup that uses anything positive for a negative end, but the question is, should we focus exclusively on that, or should we simply caveat it and move on? Because the problem is that this article is hyper focusing on a specific small subset of people that have always existed.
Yeah.
There have always been people, for example, another quick trigger warning, we're going to talk about the AB word. There has always been a small subset of people that will lie about that, about things that they've gone through and things that other people have supposedly done to them. But they should not, the worry of that should not drown out the people who really have gone through it, because it's such a small subset of people. That's like, it's the sheer amount of, like, I guess, doubt that is placed upon anybody who comes forward with certain kinds of claims. There is this instinct of, well, what if they're lying? And 90% of the time, 99% of the time, they're not. And in fact, the majority of those sorts of crimes go unreported. But there's still this fear. And so there's like, well, what if the majority of these people are all lying about these things in order to try to get attention? It's like, okay, but like, are you what is the harm that's being done here? Are you claiming that like they're going to become depressed because they're performatively acting like they are online? Like, how is this actually that's the question we need to stop and ask, is how is this doing harm except for the trivialization of genuine things? Like,
Yeah.
if it's being misrepresented, the harm that's being done primarily is just a misrepresentation of stuff like depression and anxiety, but in terms of like the individual people, there isn't necessarily being as much harm being done, except for maybe somebody who thinks they can only get attention by being sad. The primary harm that I think is being done by this sort of thing is just that misrepresentation. But again, that exists across media, which is something even Blair admitted in her own video.
Yeah.
She quoted a much better article than this one about that representation problem. So the problem is misrepresentation, not because it's trendy, but because that's been done since the beginning of time.
Yeah. How much more of this article have we got to go?
A little bit, because we've got the sad girl history, and then at the end we've got caught between glamorization and destigmatization, which, you know, this is a point we did want to bring up, which is,
Yeah, can we skip to that, because I have to go to work in about half an hour or so.
so, like, there's an entire thing on the history of sad girls, and if you guys want to read the parts of the article that we're skipping over, you're welcome to. There's a link in the description to this article. But then it goes caught between glamorization and destigmatization. There's no quick and dirty guide for how we can do sad online culture responsibly. Both are happening online, with obvious examples of glorification and obvious examples of normalization that allow people to get support they need, says Whitlock, the Cornell professor. But there's a lot of gray in between, and the answer of whether or not it does more harm than good depends on who's reading and what their personal filters for perception are. And that's the thing.
Yeah.
I feel like there's a baby in bathwater situation going on here, because the good representation, in my experience at least, especially on spaces like YouTube, but like the more positive representation and destigmatization seems to primarily outweigh the risks, because it is an active counter narrative to the misrepresentation that's already going on in mainstream media.
Yeah.
So I think that the question here is, wholesale education, which isn't even possible, isn't like a solution, but what could possibly be a solution?
Mm. Yeah, and it's also one of the things is a lot of there are some people who have gone, I've had this thing wrong with me for so long, blah blah blah, and it turns out they have this bizarre and rare disorder that 4 people on the planet knows about. And so this person's searching and searching and searching, they come across this random thing that they've never heard of before. But it's so incredibly rare, like BIID. I'm just going back to BIID because that's the first one that's come to my mind. And then all of a sudden they're like, this is the thing that I have, and they've got a name to their disorder. And so that's really important part of, like, I remember I was in a Twitter thread and someone was like, oh, you it's so weird talking about this online. Like, I've got this weird thing in eyebrow. And I was like, no, talk about your disorder, because this disorder that you have, other people might not have, like might have it, but they don't know about it. You've just given them the name that they can look up. And that's how incredibly powerful this can be, just not just mental health, but physical health as well.
Well, this person, like in the article, also gives a really good solution, which is, if you're going to be talking about your stuff publicly, if you're going to be either being a public figure or talking about it in a public space, ground your experiences in reality and resist the urge to like sensationalize what you're talking about. Resist the urge to, like wildly gesticulate and be performative. Like, try to be as down to earth as possible and talk about the bad stuff with the good as well. Like, some
Yeah,
things, obviously, like depression, I'm not necessarily sure how much positive comes out of depression or anxiety, but like for ADHD, for example, I talked about like hyperfocus almost never gets discussed. Distraction
mm,
is like what everybody knows about, the oh look a squirrel joke. But there's also like the fact that I can get to competent at almost any skill fairly quickly because of hyperfocus and because of the exciting new thing stimulation. And
and
so like
yeah,
that's being grounded in my experiences. I'm not sensationalizing it, but at the same time there are aspects that don't get talked about as much. So try to discuss that alongside it too. Don't just
yeah.
speak to the things that you think will have an audience, but speak also honestly about your experiences.
And also with ADHD, we also approach problems with at random angles that no one else would have thought about. Like, you often say things like, oh, why don't we do this? Or, oh, what about this? Or whatever. And people are like, why didn't I think of that? Or how did you know about this? And it's not because I'm anything special. I've just got a ADHD brain, and I just look at something and see a different disorder, like a different answer to a question
It
that
makes
never would have.
connection, like our brains make connections that a lot of people wouldn't.
Yeah, we take 4.5 different steps. We get to the same point. It's just we don't place. We
Our
just don't.
conversations can jump topics. We make connections. Like, you're talking like to somebody who also has ADHD, sometimes also with autism, because like I have a bunch of autistic friends whose brains work similarly in this way. And like, you can go from talking about medieval corsets to talking about Justin Bieber, and you don't like you can track how you got there, but like the jumps in your conversation, you could track it if you like mapped it out. But like somebody who's neurotypical might be like, what the how did we get here?
Yeah. Yeah.
So like that's kind of the thing that we're trying to get to, is try to be responsible in your portrayal, even if the things that you're dealing with. And sometimes that could be grounding in and of itself, to like really try to look as objectively at your experiences as possible. It's a very stoic thing.
Yeah.
So Ikeda actually did your little mispronouncing dictionary. So go ahead and read that one out because you requested it.
A song by the Muppets. So Minna 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 is a song by the Muppets. Potes,
Manum.
Potes is a slang term for drinks. Yeah, I can see that. Phenomena, a numerous experience. Philosophical. A numinous. Akita, this is going to be horrible for you in the future. Philosophical. Can you ever get enough baklava? No, you can never get enough baklava. That is
unless you're me,
Ali
because
can.
I've got celiac. I was about to say any baklava is enough baklava. All right, so the answer to the question that we posed at the start is technically that is a possibility, but I don't think personally that it is like that the drawbacks are outdone by the benefits of positive representation. Oh, we've got a snack. We have the snack.
We have a snack. She's not. She's asleep. She's sort of like, huh?
Yeah. At least she's not biting. At least she's not Lilith. At least she's not eating you.
Lilith. Yeah, I won't even go near Lilith at the moment. I need to go to work. Where's the little? There she is. There's the snack.
So I think that the problem is that you have articles like this that, they're kind of doing the exact thing that they're railing against. They're sensationalizing the influence of something like social media and blowing up the risks more. The framing of the article is the exact problem that we're talking about with like misrepresentation of things. Because I don't think that the trendiness of like being open about these things is necessarily trendy. I think it's a lot of people who have been repressed for a long time, who have been not allowed to talk about these experiences. It's a veritable explosion. It's kind of like, the Me Too movement, where a lot of people never talked about certain kinds of experiences that they had, and they were finally able to open up about it. Like, these can be forces for good. A lot of people who never would have received prosecution did because people opened up. And like, I think, I've seen some better education on things like schizophrenia on YouTube than I ever saw, even in like, even in like articles and in, newspapers or magazines or things like that. I've seen people who have like DID or OSDD speaking out openly and feeling safe. There's like accessibility tools for stuff like that, like on Discord. And that sort of thing would never happen without social media. Like, there is this unprecedented ability for us to be more connected than ever. And we need to remember, and this is where I think this is the core of all of it, I think, is we need to remember that spaces on social media are basically the equivalent of like going to your local mall. You're in a common space. Like, don't expect the stuff you put on social media to stay private, no matter how many locks you put on it. Like, if you wouldn't, pull your junk out and flash somebody like in a public square, you probably shouldn't be sending pics of it. Things like that. Like, when you're talking about representations of mental illness, destigmatizing people being able to talk about it more openly is a good thing. But at the same time, there is a risk of people, I guess, like almost sensationalizing it for attention, but there's that same risk in your public square. There's the same risk in a local mall.
Yeah.
So we have to kind of consider that, even though like trends are shifting, you having that conversation about the experiences you had, like that struggle, like I've talked to my patrons before about like, hey, I'm really struggling to like get my brain to let me get up and go do anything other than painting right now. And like, having those conversations, there is at least one patron who let me know that they got diagnosed with ADHD because I was willing to talk about it. So like these, you just have to be really responsible with it. It's like anything else you do in public. You have to be responsible and you have to think carefully about what it is you're sharing.
Yeah. And also going back to what you were saying about mental things that you put on the internet might be saved. Perfect example, going back to the BOD video, because,
she privated that to try to make it disappear without ever talking about it. But the internet is forever.
And I was the one who downloaded it. I downloaded it to get 2 clips, I think, from it. I thought, oh yeah, I'll just download it. And now it's back up on the internet. And she can't make me take it down because it's not on YouTube.
It's on a Google Drive.
It's on a Google Drive, because she can DMCA my video, my channel. And she would do that. I'm surprised that I haven't got an email going, hey, cease and desist. But again, this will probably, she never responded to my video because of the Streisand effect. And if she
Well, and
tried
you were
to,
just such a small creator that, like, she probably
yeah,
wouldn't
I'm
care. She wouldn't
tiny
even care
little,
if I did. Like, I've got 11,000 subscribers, and she wouldn't even care if I did.
yeah. So yeah, so that was one of the things. Like, if she tried to send me a cease and desist letter, I would absolutely let every single person know, and I would be like, Ali, let's have a chat, and can you let everyone know? Because yeah, that'll definitely come up. And yeah, so when it comes to smaller creators responding to you, not saying anything about it, like what she did with Cruel World Happy Mind, she wouldn't say her name
But
in an
she
interview.
definitely threatened to.
Yeah. And so yeah, so Streisand effect, and there was no way she didn't know this was a shit video. Like, there had to, like, as I was saying in my video, it took me, I had to do advanced Google foo to try and find a video, articles that never mentioned the neurological aspect to BIID.
It was a
Like, I,
gift gallop of ableist takes, which reminds me,
yeah.
I will put the link to your video in the description for folks who listen. But you said you needed to get to work soon, so we need to wrap this up. Do you have any final thoughts on the topic for this video? Again, I gave my summary, which is sometimes, but it's not necessarily as big of a problem if we're careful. Because
Yeah.
I think that the positive representation, the proper representation, is
Mm.
much more powerful and lasting, and we need to do work to amplify voices that are doing it right rather than worrying so much about the people who are doing it wrong.
Yeah. I would agree with you on that one. Another thing that I would say is that like, having firsthand responses, firsthand experiences, um, gives a much more nuanced and beautiful thing with regard, like, reading scientific articles doesn't give the humanity section of it. So not having those voices, or talking about it, not having it having experience firsthand, or having talk to somebody with the experiences firsthand, dilutes the complexity and the beauty of certain people's disorders, and it can lead to some pretty horrible attitudes. For example, I
Well, and
was
sometimes not even the beauty, but just like the experience of it. Cause like a
mm,
lot of people will severely discount like things like, for example, dyslexia and how much dyslexia can really mess with your life. But if you talk to somebody who has like more severe dyslexia, it is insane how many things just become so much harder when it's that much harder to read.
yeah.
Like it's
Well,
it's insane how much we take for granted, like how text-based our culture is.
yeah, like, well, perfect example is that I know somebody with dyslexia, and they went to a country that doesn't have like, English words, basically, like English literature,
Letters.
not
Mhm.
literate letters, that's the word. And they went, I think it was Japan,
Mhm.
and their friend was like, "Oh, I don't know where we're going or whatever," and she was perfectly fine because she can't read in English, so she was fine reading, not being able to read in Japanese.
Mhm.
so so but yeah, it's just one of those really interesting, it's just one of those things where you don't recognize, you don't, if you don't talk or know about something firsthand, we miss out on a lot of the beauty that can come from a lot of, like, the disabilities.
Things
Um,
like autism and ADHD in particular, like
yeah,
neurodivergence, and
yeah,
like even the experiences of some systems that I've talked to. But like there's
mm,
also you can miss also the nuances of people's struggles. Like, I have a friend who has severe depression and like I haven't experienced severe depression myself, but like listening to his struggles, you might not realize how different it is than, like
mm,
just being sad. Or like my friend who has OCD, like when
mm,
he started describing to me the things he has to do in order to feel stable, like it completely transformed my view of like what that term means. So
mm,
I think the answer is technically it can, but be cautious. Be cautious in the way that you represent yourself. Be careful. And like I think amplify the voices of the people who do it right.
yeah,
Make sure you double check what you're sharing.
mhm, yep, and Yeah.
Nimona, I have not seen it, so I have no idea.
Yeah.
So with that, the bridge is back. Not next week, but off weeks that are not release weeks, we are going to be doing the bridge going forward at 5 p.m. Pacific time. So not next week because I'm doing an interview. The week after is going to be a release. So 3 weeks from now, we will be having another bridge. We will announce the topic then. Obviously, if you're in the Discord, links in the description if you haven't joined already. But if you're in the Discord, you'll get an advanced notice of what the topic is, usually the day ahead of time. But we are going to be shifting because of Marrow's channel primarily towards talking about science and a little bit of politics. But thank you guys so much for coming back to the Return of the Bridge. You guys have been incredibly generous. You guys are amazing. I was so happy to see as many of you here as you were. Mara was thrilled. Like, she's even had a cold and made sure to make it here. So thank you guys again.
You said that my bags under my eyes have bags, and we were making a joke about how they can be my pants because female pockets don't exist.
Yeah, you were like, my bags are so big, my bags have pockets, and I'm like, so can you use them to store things? And you're like, well, they're bigger than the ones on my pants. For the record, by the way, we just are this way. Like, for those of you who are wondering if our rapport is just because we're like co-hosts and we're faking our friendship, no, we just talk like this all the time.
Yeah.
Like, this is just the way we are.
Yeah.
All right,
so
well,
I apologize for being like death warmed up, but you know, I'm
you're here.
At least I'm warm. At least I'm warm.
Warm enough that your neck is all kinds of wrapped around you.
Yeah. All right, my loves. Right. Say goodbye. Don't forget to not give yourself the raw prawn.
We're stronger together. Have a good night, everyone.
Bye.